Hello guys, so in today's video I will be talking about the books I have read so far. Today it is February 14th. Happy Valentine's Day again. So I hope you guys are spending time with your loved ones, lovers, your family members, animals. So happy love day, however you understand it. As I said, I want to talk to you a little bit about the books that I have read so far. So please get comfortable and let's get into it. Alright, Jambo Karibu, welcome to my channel. My name is Chilanda and this is Library Without Borders. So today's vlog, I will be going over the books that I've read, and I am actually baking. I have attempted to bake a cake. I used to bake, you guys, I used to bake back in the days, and I had bought a few gears, but then I realized that I love sugar and it wouldn't be a good thing for me to get into making cake because I would get, but anyways, so I'm waiting for the cake to be cold so I can actually, decorate it a little. While we do that, let's talk about the first book that I read. So, first book that I read is Toussaint Louverture. My God. So the first book, as I said, is Toussaint Louverture by Philippe Girard. Now, this book, I did not mention it in my TBR. I'm listening to it. It was free and I decided to listen to it. The first time I got exposed to Toussaint Louverture was when I read that book by Vanessa Riley, Sister Warrior Mother. She spoke about Toussaint Louverture and Jean-Jacques Dessalines in that book. And ever since I had a taste for the story of Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution, I wanted to really get an in-depth story about that character. And boy, oh boy, was I in for a ride. Toussaint Louverture was obviously descendant of Africans, and precisely historians, researchers, and Africans who've done their research believe that his dad was descendant of the Alada people, which is somewhere near Dahomey. Maybe put a map here. So obviously his dad was transported into one of those slave ships and he arrived in Saint-Domingue, because Haiti back then was called, in the 1700s, because that's when the story really takes flight, all right? So it was called Saint-Domingue. And guys, this story, it talks about Louverture, his beginning. It talks about his childhood. It talks about his time in military. It talks about his adult life, but it also talks about the people that he surrounded himself with and how the Haitian Revolution was one of those revolutions around the world that has never been repeated again. Now, the thing with Toussaint Louverture, as I have come to learn, was that he was a complex character. And he was a complex character because when he learned to write, he started writing all these, I guess, autobiography. He started writing about his life. And one thing about him was that he wanted to be French. And he he also wanted to eradicate the African side that didn't want to belong to the African side. So he did everything to belong to the French. And one thing about Toussaint Louverture is that he spoke Fon, which is a language found in West Africa, and he also spoke Creole. He spoke French. He basically tried to speak the language of the people that were in Saint-Domingue. Now, one thing I learned about Saint-Domingue, another thing I learned about Saint-Domingue is that it was full of people of color. There were multiple names that were used to describe the people of Saint-Domingue. So you had people of color, you had Africans, you had blacks, you had whites, you had little whites, you had the big whites, you had the colonists, you also had like the mulatto, you had the quadroons. I'm telling you. And one thing that I sort of felt some type of way of, but then I tried to understand that the times were different back then, was that a lot of these people of color felt superior to black people because they were directly descendant of Africans, and people of color were mixed, right? They were black and white, and they were another group that were also part of the problem because they felt superior to black on Saint-Domingue. So to spare you the details of that story, because it went deep into the wars, the torture, it went into details. When I said, like, you heard about the French Revolution, you heard about the American Revolution, you heard about how Toussaint Louverture at some point played not only Britain against Spain and then against French, because Saint-Domingue was the colony of French, and at some point during the 1700s, Spain and both Britain wanted Saint-Domingue because it was very important, because it was the #1 export of sugar. Because you have to remember that plantations there on Saint-Domingue were big on sugar canes. And when he talked about how slaves were meant to work in arduous situations from sunup to sundown, and they didn't even enjoy a little bit of that sugar cane that they worked the fields for. It was all exported to the French, to France, and to Spain, a little bit to the United States. And what I want to mention was the revolution. Now, the reason why this revolution is widely known is simply because there were many unsuccessful revolutions, and Toussaint Louverture was that person that was able to play his cards right and bring that revolution to fruition, simply because he had, first of all, Toussaint Louverture's personal life. He had his wife. His first wife was, I think, Cecile, and then he married Suzanne. But amidst of that, he also had like concubines or mistresses, and he had plenty of children, godchildren, and stepchildren, and all of this. And what we also find out about Toussaint Louverture is that he was a family man. He really cared about his family, and the reason why he sometimes shied away from pronouncing himself in some of those revolts was to protect his family. And although he was born a slave, he did through manumission, I believe that those are the papers that are usually given to blacks in order to gain their freedom. But during the 1700s, it was mostly given to women because some of those whites wanted to be with the mulattoes, or mostly mulattoes. So they would give them manumission so that the kids wouldn't be born into slavery. And all you guys, again, when you talk about slavery and how it was passed on down to children, like when children realized that they were born into bondage, this book just was fantastic. Although he's not black, but I have to admit that the way he wrote the story of Toussaint Louverture was fantastic, because there are many versions of Toussaint Louverture's life, but I found that this one was very interesting. So again, the reason I wanted to mention Toussaint Louverture's personal life and the reason why he was shying away from the revolts, it was simply because he wanted to protect his family. But he was also a strategic man. You know, he wasn't prone to just go by impulse and then just fight whites, or what were other revolutionists were trying to get white people out of the plantations. Like, so much killings. Like, one thing about this book, you guys, it talks about the killings. Like, I think Haitians, and I remember even my friend said that Haitians in French means haïr les autres. Like, I think their motto was like liberty or death. And that's how, like, Saint-Domingue people took their freedom. They were killing, whether whites, colored, black. And when the author talks about numbers, at some point he talks about how blacks were like 90% in Saint-Domingue, and then white people were less than that, but somehow they were able to brainwash the black people there and tell them they were almost invincible. Because how do you have so many blacks and you are able to whip, torture? There was this torture that they talked about, like the wheel, which would be like in the market, and you guys, like, you would be like, I guess, your arms, legs put on that, and then you would stretch, you'd be cut. Like they talked about cutting ears, burning. Like, I'm telling you, it was a lot. So the only thing I need to conclude this, you guys, because I can talk about Toussaint Louverture's story in depth, but I don't want to do that. So Toussaint Louverture managed to decolonize Saint-Domingue. He succeeded into making Saint-Domingue, which today is called Haiti, a independent of France, and that did not go well with France. And at some point, at the end, before he was exiled and brought into France, so France decided to take revenge. France was not happy that Toussaint Louverture, although was very, very loyal to France for a long time, but in the end, he decided to let Saint-Domingue be decolonized. So France decided to bring Napoleon and his army of I don't know how many soldiers, but Toussaint was not defeated, simply because, you know what, he knew that if he was not going to be able to defeat the army, the plague, the disease of the island would get to those white people. And Lord behold, he was right. Almost 10,000, if not more, of those soldiers that arrived on Saint-Domingue died because of the diseases. Long story short, Toussaint Louverture was sent to France and he died in prison. And that's where he wrote his autobiography, basically, during prison. And he tried to reason with Napoleon because he felt that he was a French person. He did a lot. His 2 kids were there in France. He did a lot for France, and the fact that they were letting him rot in France was terrible. But that's how Toussaint Louverture finished his days. And I think he was succeeded by 2 of his kids afterwards. And today, France and Haiti all want to claim Toussaint Louverture. Although all of them were like, he's African, he's black, and blah, blah, blah. But today they all want to claim Toussaint Louverture. So go figure. And I just want to say Toussaint Louverture's revolt was not all by his own force or doing. He had plenty of other allies. You know, he had Jean-Jacques Dessalines. He had a lot of names were mentioned. So I recommend picking up that book. So please pick it up. So next, I read Brooding Over Revenge by Nikki M. Taylor. This book is essentially talking about slave revolts that women during slavery executed and the reasons why they were committing those revolts. Today, we can understand why. There is nothing that anyone can say today in order to claim that some of them liked being enslaved. There's no such thing. There's nothing, no argument, nothing. So anyways, so what the author was trying to show here was that she started the story by saying how over 200 women were executed in the United States. And the reasons varied. It was sometimes because of murder, sometimes because of attempted murder. And most of the examples she gives, it's about these women who've succeeded in actually killing their masters, their owner, their planters. And most of these deaths are very brutal, y'all. They're very brutal. And today, with our sensibilities, some of us will be like, oh, Jesus, because yes, there are murders of kids. But what the author does, and she does it nicely, is to talk to you about how blacks, how enslaved women were killed, tortured. Most of the time, these women were burnt, hung, and sometimes dragged into the streets all the way to the hanging place and then burned at the stake. Okay, so you can just imagine when you hear about the retaliation on white bodies, life has been taken. but look at the context in which it was taken, right? So the author talks about how enslaved women revolted daily by simply feeling exhaustion, debilitating menstrual pain, pregnancy, disobedience, temporarily running away. She also says that the slave revolt from the colonial to the early national and antebellum eras, they are explored in the following states in the United States. So she went through Massachusetts, North Carolina, the eastern anti-slavery states of Pennsylvania, New York, the upper states of Kentucky and Virginia, and finally Texas in the Southwest. Those are the places she explored the women's slave revolts. And she also said these women were methodical, in their killings. Like, one example, you guys, is of this woman who had this mistress of hers who kept screaming. And one thing that the author talks about is how the enslaved women were sometimes transferred onto another plantation multiple times, and sometimes by themselves, separated from their families. And you have this young girl who is transported into one plantation, and she has to do everything in that plantation. First of all, she has to work from sun up to sundown. She has to do laundry. She has to do all kinds of work. She has to take care of the kids on that plantation. And at some point, she is faced with those children telling on her about anything. Like, even the little things that didn't matter, those little kids will go and tell, their parents. So what happens one day is that she goes to the water where they usually wash the clothes with one of the children of the house. And what happens? She drowns the child. Yes, she drowns the child. Not once, twice. And I think she's like 16 or 18 years old, the enslaved woman who perpetuates that. And what happens to her is that she's obviously caught. And you have to remember as well, the judicial system back then was definitely not in favor of black women. It was, first of all, the planters themselves were part of the jury, and it was white people, usually like neighbors. So you can just imagine, her fate was sealed already. She would be found guilty and brought she would be either hung or burned. And she has a couple of examples, all of them ranging from like bad to worse. There was another one where an enslaved woman literally butchered the whole family. Like, the men survived, but she took an axe and went in on those white bodies, and there was a baby involved. As I said, it's gruesome, it's terrible, but you have to remember that what was done to black bodies for centuries. And she talks about 200 cases where these women were hung or killed in retaliation to or consequences to what they done. It's sad. An innocent life was taken, but let's look at the whole context, right? Brooding over bloody revenge. What a spectacular book. I also wanted to mention, she also talked about the slave code, which was enacted in order to deter slaves from running away or inciting revolts. And then she says no blacks were allowed to serve in jury duty until 1860. Self-defense was not an option for enslaved people because the slavers had the right to harsh disciplinary action against their slaves. And you're gonna go wonder why they're gonna commit those crimes? Enslaved people used poisoning methods to murder their slavers. That was the most common one. And when Phyllis and Mark were tried and hung, they took the body of Mac post-mortem and used it as a gibbet, hung with chains in a customized cask for the world to see. Yo, that one was terrible. It was a couple who committed this murder, and although the way the story goes, the man had nothing to do with it because he was associated with a woman, they both were hung, and their bodies were exposed for the world to see for 20 years, y'all. So because fornication, adultery were illegal in those colonies, white men sought sexual pleasure release among the enslaved women. They could not engage in sexual activities with white women because they could get fined, imprisoned, or publicly shamed. Do you understand? They were not seen as people, they were seen as properties to dispose of in any way and to be taken advantage of in any way. This is what I'm talking about. When you see these brutal murders, think about all these other matters, all these other facts. In 1780, the Gradual Abolition Act in Pennsylvania is enacted. Children born of enslaved women will be freed after the age of 28. That was one thing. But what happened is that before then or after then, your life would be completely different if you were born before or after. Between 1780 and 1804, gradual abolition laws were enacted in Rhode Island, New York, and New Jersey. They were required to be educated as well. That was a good thing. In conclusion, you guys, we don't need to understand, because it is hard for us to try and conceive what these women were going through, because we can't, right? But then we cannot sit here and try to judge these women, because Lord knows they had to do what they had to do, knowing the consequences. For me and for the author, she says, if that's not badass, I mean, I'm sorry, right? So there you have it. Next, I read The Impatient by Jali Amadou Amal. Now, this story, as it says, is based on the author's experiences. So listen, y'all. This book, oh my gosh. So it's the story of 3 women, okay? 2 of them are sisters. So it is the story of, let me see, Ramla and Hindu. And obviously this is a Muslim family. This story was so hard to digest simply because it hurts, you know, the way these women were treated in this society. And this story takes place in Cameroon. Okay, it's a country in Africa for everyone. I just want to start this story by reading you guys is it page 5, what is given as advice to these women who are going into their marriage. So Munial, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, means patience. And throughout the book, you see that word being repeated over and over and over again. Even in very precarious situations, these women are asked to be patient. Patience. Munial. Okay. This is one of the uncle to Ramla and Hindu. Respect your 5 daily prayers. Read the Quran so that your progeny will be blessed. Fear your God. Spare your minds from distraction. Be for him a slave, and he will be your captive. Be for him the earth, and he will be your sky. Be for him a field, and he will be your rain. Be for him a bed, and he will be your hut. Do not sulk. Do not look down on a gift. Do not return it. Do not be bad-tempered. Do not be talkative. Do not be scatterbrained. Do not beg. Do not demand. Be modest. Be grateful. Be patient. Be discreet. Valorize him so that he will honor you. Respect his family and submit to them so they will support you. Aid your husband. Preserve his fortune. Preserve his dignity. Preserve his appetite. May he never starve because of your laziness, your bad mood, or your bad cooking. Spare his sight, his hearing, his sense of smell. May his eyes never be confronted by anything dirty in your food in your house. May his ears never hear obscenities or insults coming from your mouth. May his nose never smell anything that reeks in your body or in your house. May he breathe in only perfume and incense. This is my favorite. May your parents never learn of anything unpleasant in your household. Keep your conjugal conflicts to yourself. Do not cultivate dislike between your 2 families, or you will reconcile by the hatred you sow will last. Now that I can actually attest to this advice, because it's given to most, I think, Africans, you know, those advice of never talk about your business because you guys will make up. But if you go and tell your families, they're gonna harbor bad feelings towards your partner, and then, you know, that's it. I want to talk about the story of Hindu. Ramla is sister to Hindu. She gets married into this family where there is already another wife, and this wife, her name is Safira. She's older, and she was, when I say older, she's in her 30s, and she was the sole wife of her husband until Ramla is forced to marry him. because he demanded, he literally went into Ramla's family and said, I want your daughter. Even though I'm 50 years old, I want your daughter. Was like, I think she was 16, 18. And poor Ramla was only trying to finish school. And she actually had her eyes set on this boy. And then her parents were like, you know what? Not even her parents, her dad's brothers. Because I guess in Muslim families, the dad's brothers get involved. They decided that for the best of the family, go marry this older man and forget that little boy. He's nothing. Long story short, you guys, she obviously was sad. She was very depressed, but nothing could be done about it. And women are very insignificant. They cannot appeal to their husbands' softness, kindness, pity, nothing. That's how invaluable women are. And she tried to appeal to her mom. Her mom was like, I can't do nothing, and you just have to go. So she goes and marries into Safira's family. You know, she becomes a co-wife to Safira. I'm not going to talk about her. I'm going to talk about her sister, Ramla's sister, who's Hindu. Not Hindu, but her name is Hindu. So what happens to her? She marries her cousin. Yes, you heard me. She is forced to marry her cousin, and that cousin is so brutal. And the family knows, y'all. The family knows that the cousin is bad. He's bad-tempered. He's bad news. But yet, they forced their pure daughter to marry this dude. When I tell you the way she gets beaten for no reason, he would come home drunk and demand that she does things that he would watch porn, he would watch adult show and ask her to do those things. Not only that, he would rape and beat her. Like, when I say beat her, she would be bleeding, have a black eye and all of that. And all the family members, her mother-in-laws, all of them would know what's going on, and they would say nothing, you guys. Say nothing. And one time, which really affected me, was he came again in one of those rage moods of his. He comes back home and decides that he wants it. He wants it right there and then, but he also wants to eat. And then she goes, like, in the dark, like in the middle of the night, out there in the compound where they're all living. And by the way, they're all living there. Mothers, sisters, mother-in-law, cousins, nephews, they're all there, okay? He asked her to cook for him. She's like, okay, and she's trembling, like this girl, and she's going, and she's so scared, and she wants it to be cooked fast, but she can only do so much. Her husband comes and beats the shit out of her. She pees herself. You guys, that killed me. That killed me. And you know what happens to her, you guys? I think she goes crazy. I'm gonna stop there. I don't want to ruin the story, but that's her life. Let's go back to Ramla and Safira. Their story are obviously intertwined because she's the co-wife of Safira. And Safira decides that, you know what? She's gonna make Ramla's life miserable. And oblivious to the fact that Ramla does not want to be the wife of this old man, these women are they're taking their wrath on other women, knowing how women are powerless in these situations. And for me, that literally made me go berserk. Like, I was like, you know that you women don't have power, so you know that she was forced to marry your old man. Which young girl wants to marry a 50-year-old woo? Like, this was not in the, like, it's in the 2000s. Like, this is very recent. And unfortunately, Safira is not trying to reason. So she decides one day, because the husband calls both wives in his office, he shows them where the money is put in case that, you know, for their needs and all that stuff. So Safira decides that while the husband takes Ramla on a trip in Paris, somewhere in France, abroad, she decides to take the money. It was like a big amount of money. Decides to take that money, appropriate that money, and dispose of it. So the husband comes and he decides that he asks what happened to the money. So he asks both women. Ramla says, I don't know. Safira says, I don't know. The man says, I will repudiate. Repudiate. That word kills me. Repudier. Vous deux which means like I will literally divorce you, or I will, and you guys go back into your families, which obviously is the no. And Ramla is crying. She's like, I didn't do nothing. I didn't take that money. I don't even see the color. Safira knows what's going on. She's like, no, nothing. All of that because she wants her to be repudiated. She wants Ramla to be sent away, like even killed. And at some point in the story, it gets to the point where the man beats her senseless to the point where she has to go to the hospital. Yo, what I'm telling you, this story, this book, Tiny, had me like angry. And I know we're here, you guys, and we cannot be talking about other people's, culture, religion, as if we know some things. But there are certain treatments that are humane. So this story, as you can tell, it had me like, I was like, whoo! But it's a quick read, but I recommend to read this. The Impatient by Jelly Amadou Amal. Please pick it up if you haven't. Pick it up. And then, you guys, I read this book. Finally, Mother to Mother by Sindiwe Magona. This book, you guys, oh my god, I actually cried. You guys, when I hear other booktubers talk about how they're looking for books that make them cry, these are the books. Because people are trying to cry by going to find fictional stories. If you are true and honest and you truly say that you want to cry, go pick up some of these, it's a fictional story, but based on true stories. Go pick that up and you will see what gut-wrenching is, what traumatic is, what rawness is, This was it. So it's a story of a mother, a black mother in South Africa and a white mother. And it's a black mother was writing a letter to that white mother, explaining the events that unfolded with their children. So her son is one of the accused who killed the daughter of this white woman. And the reason why this story is actually real is the story of Emmy Beale. Look it up, guys. She was born in the United States. She's actually American. And what happened is that she was violently killed. Like she was stoned and stabbed. And before, y'all gasped and be like, whoa, hey. And that's what the mother tries to bring to your attention. You want to see this black boy and condemn him already, because yes, he killed, but he is not the only one who killed. He was part of a mob that night that conducted that murder. He was one among many that stoned the car and that may have stabbed the woman. And basically what she goes into details explaining her life, first of all, how she began, how they were living in another part of South Africa and then were forced to go into Guguletu. I'm not pronouncing this word, but it's Guguletu, another part of South Africa, and the government just forced them, all these black people, onto this township. And then she grew up there, and she talks about how the events of giving birth to her son Mxolisi, probably say that, Mxolisi, and how he was born of a I don't know, you guys, thank God it's fictional, but apparently she didn't have sex with the guy, but she got pregnant. Okay, I'm just gonna spare you guys. But the strange event in which the pregnancy occurred happened, and she talks to you about what she went through with her son, the joys of motherhood, but also becoming a mother at a young age, because she was a teen, she was still finishing school. And then one thing that she mentions, she talks about Mxolisi, and he was 4 years old, and what happened is that the police, I'm gonna talk about the police because the word police and white everywhere around the world seems to have the same connotation. It's negative. But let me hold off on that first. So the police came looking for these two small boys, and these boys used to play with Mxolisi. They used to play with them. They were having fun. They were great kids. They were small kids. Yo, what happened is that they ransacked those already dilapidated houses where the mom lived. trying to find those kids, and they're screaming, asking like, where did those boys go? And no one is answering. Everybody, like even the parents of the boys, they hid him in the closet. And poor Mxolisi thought that it was a game. They're probably playing hide and seek. He's like, there they are in the closet. And the boys tried to run away, but unfortunately they were caught and then shot right there. And the little boy, Mxolisi, he was traumatized and didn't speak for 2 years. And the mom talks about that in the letter that she is writing to the white mom for 2 years. Anyways, that's another aspect. And then she talks about growing up with her great-grandfather. And great-grandfather asks her one day, what do you guys get taught in school? And she tells them what they're getting taught and how the history of South Africa happened and all of that. And the great-grandfather laughs and is like, that's not how the story goes. White Boers came into the land. Not only they took over the land that they found people in, okay? They pushed those people far, far away into arid areas of South Africa, and they took over. And not only they took over, they killed. He talked about the violence that ensues, as well as the role of the government today. She talks about Mxolisi, his childhood, but then we are brought to his, teenage years, because he's 20 at the time of the murder. And then she talks about his generation, how the government has incited these kids to rebel in a sense where they can't breathe. They're in a society that keeps crushing the black people. They're not like school are in like deteriorated conditions. Like some of these kids don't even go to school. They stop going to school like in grade 6. Some of them are in grade 6, but they're older. So there are those factors that are already playing against these black kids. So every time a van will drive in Guguletu, that's the township in which they live, which is just for blacks, you don't see white people. So the thing with the daughter, she was a teacher and she was basically an activist. She was trying to better the lives of black people by teaching them and stuff like that. And she just decided that she was gonna drop these other kids in that township. She shouldn't have. She knew that white people are not tolerated in that township. And unfortunately that night there was a mob of black people that were, I guess, thirsty for blood. So they just did what they have to do. And essentially she talks about that. She talks about the history of South Africa. She talks about the conditions in which these black kids are growing and how they're tired, they're fed up, and how they want better things for them, and how all of that precluded to the violence that ensued. And she's not trying to excuse what was done. She's just explaining what happened. And in the real story, when I went to read after, that's where I cried. Amy Beale's parents actually shook the hands of one of those accused of murders, because he said that they don't want her to have died in vain. This event is supposed to be for reconciliation, for like truth and reconciliation. And there was, I was like, I'm the mom of, like, I tried to not personalize it, but I was like, both sides, like the mom of the like I understood what this mom of the accused was trying to explain. Anyways, you guys, like I said, this book, I need you guys to read it. And apparently when you read the preface, it's actually a book that's been like, it's a book that is given, I think it's somewhere in Germany or somewhere in Europe, as a book to read either in grade 9 and grade 10 as a discussion book, and also in the United States. And like, you need to get to this book. Like, it was well written. The English could be a little, including the language, it could be a little, complex, but other than that, the message of this book is one to like hold on to. I'm done. So there you have it, you guys. I'm gonna go finish that cake, and that's it. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you in my next video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. Bye.